Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. In the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he is saying that Sri Krishna is building up to teach something very profound. So, in the verses 16, 17, Sri Krishna has already told us that what is karma, what is action, and what is not action. Even the wisest of people are confused here. And I shall tell you that, this secret, I'm going to tell you a secret, by knowing which you will attain liberation. Mokshyase ashubhat. You will be free of samsara. You will be free of the inauspicious. He means samsara here. You will get the highest thing, that is liberation, salvation, freedom. He goes on to say that, one might think, what is so special about action and not action? I mean, if you do something, that's action. If you just sit quietly, that's not action. That's all. You lie down, that's not action. No, he says, Krishna said in the 17th verse, there is something deep to be understood about action. There is something deep to be understood about what is wrong action, and something equally deep to be understood about what is not action. Because he said, Gahana karmano gati. Mysterious and profound are the ways of action. So with this background, Sri Krishna has come to the 18th verse, which is one of the most important verses of the whole Bhagavad Gita. In this verse, this already advertised and promised secret will be revealed to us. And what he's going to do here in this 18th verse is basically the essence of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. What is the crucial teaching? He has already said that in the second chapter, that we are the Atman or we are Brahman, that has been taught. But now, the big issue is how to make it manifest in our life. You see, the one thing is to become enlightened. One thing is to know the ultimate truth. But then another thing, equally important, more important, is to live it. Is to live that truth, to walk the talk. As Swami Vivekananda very profoundly defined religion as the manifestation of the divinity already within us. So it's not just knowing or realizing the divinity, but it has to be expressed. We must feel it within ourselves. It must be expressed in our speech and our action. So the manifestation of the divinity. How can we divinize our lives? How can we get the promised benefits from that ultimate reality of realizing that I am Brahman? So what is the core teaching and how do you make it manifest in life? I think this is the sum and substance of spirituality. And that's what he's going to talk about. In fact, he will start in this verse. The whole essential teaching will be in this verse. This is the most important verse. 18th verse of 4th chapter. Very important. But then he will expand upon this theme for the next few verses, reaching a climax in the 24th verse. So from the 18th to the 24th is a kind of summation of Advaita Vedanta, the path of knowledge. The 24th verse is probably very well known to all of us. It's what we chant before our meals. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavi. So it's going to reach a climax in that verse. But the crucial teaching is in this verse, which is coming up now. This verse is interesting. I'll chant the verse and translate, and then we'll look at it. So today's entire class is devoted to this one verse. It's very important that we get a handle on what's going on here. Karmaṇyakarma paśhyed akarmaṇi sa buddhimān manuṣhyeṣhu sa yuktaḥ kṛitsna-karma-kṛit. Translation: he who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is wise amongst men. He is poised and a performer of all actions. Paradoxical language. How do you see when there's activity going on, you say there is no activity, and when there is no activity, you see there is activity, and how is this being wise, and so on. So it's paradoxical language. Why does Krishna not say outright, you are Brahman, and then live your life as if you are Brahman? Instead of saying that, why does he go through this paradoxical language? Two reasons. One, there's a cute story about this. So let me share the cute story first, and I'll give you the deeper philosophical reason next. Why this difficult paradoxical language? the story goes back to the writing of the Mahabharata. So the Bhagavad Gita is, of course, part of the Mahabharata, which is huge, is tremendously long epic. I am just reminded, yesterday I was in this online class at the Harvard Divinity School with a group of PhD students. Among them is Nell Hawley, who is Professor Jack Hawley's daughter. Jack Hawley came and gave a talk at the Vedanta Society, and she is the Sanskrit teacher for Harvard University, Nell. And she is doing her PhD at the same time, and her PhD is on the Mahabharata. So this enormous text. Now the cute story about this is, of course, Vyasa composed it, the sage Vyasa, and for his stenographer, for his scribe, he had none other than Ganesha. Ganesha was supposed to write it down. And Ganesha had a condition. Ganesha said to Vyasa that I'll do it, I'll write it, you dictate what you want me to write and I'll write this thing down, but the condition is you can't stop. If you pause, I will just walk away. I'll leave it. I'll be ruthless about it. I won't come back to the work. It will be unfinished. So today we would have said that the kid has serious ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. You give him a pill. But Ganesha, that was Ganesha's condition. Vyasa was no less, because Vyasa knew if you compose it, you have to take a breath and to think about it. And you're writing it in verses, in Sanskrit verses, no less. To compose thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, it is more than 100,000 verses. So to compose that without any break, that's impossible. So he had to build in some kind of fail-safe, So he said, all right, done. I have a condition too. What's the condition? I will compose and dictate to you, you write it down, but the condition is you must not write anything that you don't understand. So you have to understand and then write it down. It's often very easy to take down dictation without understanding. If you have written or typed when somebody is dictating, I have done it. You get into a flow, and when you realize you're not really listening to what is being said, it's somehow bypassing your conscious, the capacity to interpret and cognize what is being said. Without understanding also, one can keep typing it out. So Ganesha he agreed to this condition. All right, I won't write anything without understanding. So what Vyasa did was, when he was running out of steam, maybe running out of breath, he would compose a particularly difficult verse. In Sanskrit, these are called granthi. Granthi means knot. So he would compose that, and it would take Ganesha just a moment, He's tremendously intelligent, but he would pause. What does that mean? And by the time it took Ganesha time to understand what was meant, Vyasa would have composed maybe dozens more verses, and he could sail along nicely. So some of these difficult verses, they are scattered across the Mahabharata. In the Bhagavad Gita also there are a few, and this is one of them. So this was to put the brakes on Ganesha. So this is just a story, this cute story about it. The deeper philosophical reason is the truth about Advaita Vedanta, that we are this pure consciousness. It cannot be expressed in language. Why it cannot be expressed in language? We keep hearing it. It is beyond language, beyond thought. Why it cannot be expressed in language? I have given a whole talk about that. Advaita Vedanta and the paradox of language. There are reasons why the ultimate reality is beyond language, beyond expression, beyond thought. But given that it is beyond language, how do you express it in language? Because the Gita is language, the Upanishads are language, the text, language. How do you express the inexpressible through language? It seems impossible, but they have worked. The ancient rishis had different ways of working around this problem. One way, of course, we know the famous neti neti. If you cannot say what it is, you can at least say what it is not. You can say it is not this, it is not this, and thereby indirectly indicate what you want to say. Another way is by paradoxical language. The use of paradoxes, greater than the greatest, smaller than the smallest. How can the same thing be greater than the greatest and smaller than the smallest? It moves not. Tadejati tannejati in the Ishopanishad. How is it that the same thing at the same time moves and moves not? It is farther than the farthest and nearer than the nearest. How is that possible? So paradoxical language is one way of getting around this problem of inexpressibility. Another way is pointing out through implied meaning. So there are different strategies. About 4 or 5 strategies were used by the rishis and the Upanishads to express the inexpressible. One is this paradoxical language. So that's the deeper philosophical reason why Krishna uses such language. So Shankaracharya writes a long commentary, page after page. Most verses he's happy to write a couple of lines or a short paragraph. But here, several pages, he goes deep into this particular verse. So what I'm going to say to you is based on his commentary. If we have time, I shall read out actually the portions of his commentary. We'll see how it sounds when you read the original. So, first of all, on the face of it, this is strange. One who sees things as they are, we consider that person to be wise. If you see things as they are not, if somebody sees the sky and says it is the sky, and sees the earth and says it is the earth, we say, okay, he's a wise person, he's telling it as it is. But if someone reverses it, looks at the sky and says, there is the earth, looks at the earth and says, that's the sky, you think he's insane. So when there is action, you should say there is action. When there is no action, you should say that's no action. The person who reverses it, Krishna says he is wise, he is a yogi, he is the accomplisher of all actions. How is that person wise? Who sees no action where there is action, who sees action where there is no action, how is that wise? So let's get into it. It is entirely based on Shankara's commentary. So here goes. It goes back to the 2nd chapter where Shankara revealed the essence of Advaita Vedanta, essence of self-knowledge. What is the essence of self-knowledge? It starts with making a distinction between what is the self and what is not the self. Why do you make this distinction? Because Advaita Vedanta, it hinges on the claim that we really do not know ourselves. What we are, we do not know that. And we think of what we think we know about ourselves is what we are not. So to correct this error, Vedanta engages in an investigation into the self. And we have seen, this is standard Advaita Vedanta. You question, who am I? Take the obvious answer, the body. And then we see why I am not the body, why I am not the mind. And various methodologies are applied here. Methods of investigation which all of us, we can do now, straight away, easily available to us, immediately. For example, Drigdrishya, the one, you are familiar with it because it's one of my favorite approaches. The distinction between the seer and the seen. What we see, what we know as an object can't be me. I am the knower. So what is known by me is an object. How can that be me? Is this crucial distinction understood? It's a very important, very simple distinction. That which I know, I see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it. I am the seer, hearer, smeller, taster or toucher of that thing. I cannot be that thing. So this distinction between subject and object, which is implicit, but we don't pay attention to it. Advaita Vedanta forces us to pay attention to something that's obvious. That you are the seer, you are the witness, you are not the witnessed object. So, the body, it's an object. And I am the witness of that. Even more so, the mind, full of objects. They are subtle objects, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, memories, ideas, even the ego, object. I am aware of it. And therefore, we are pushed back to this pure subject. Why pure subject? Pure not in the sense of a very good subject, pure in the sense of a subject divested of all objects. I am the knower or experiencer or witness of this entire panorama of the world, of this ever-changing body, and even more fast-changing mind. I was just reading today in the news, it was there. Recent quote from the famous actress Sophia Loren. She says, it's the body which changes. The mind does not change. It sounds Vedantic, so I was attracted. I clicked that and I read. What she's saying is that she's talking how she has become older. Her body has become older. But she says that when she says mind does not change, what she means is it's actually a very, very good observation. Our habits, our personality, our quirks, they don't change very easily. The body gets older, but we basically remain the same person with all our faults and strengths and weaknesses. It doesn't change so much. And that's a very interesting spiritual insight. The yogis know about it. The subtle body, which is what she is calling the mind, that changes ever so slowly from lifetime to lifetime. That's the one which slowly evolves. But the mind changes. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, they come and go very fast. I am the witness of all of these. Other methods also, they come to the same conclusion. What's another method? The method of the 5 sheets. Observe physical, what we think of ourselves. Entirety is we are not that. What do you know about yourself? The physical body. It's what is called the annamaya kosha, the vital sheet, the physiological body, the food body, the actual physical body. Then there's the pranamaya kosha, the body of prana, which is the physiological body, the vital body, where all our life activities are taking place. So far observable by the doctor. External observer can see the physical body and also the functioning. So it's what a pathology report will show up to. A good doctor will see what's going on there. But now we go into something deeper. We observe about ourselves a mind, not just the annamaya, pranamaya, but also the manomaya. And this is where it goes beyond the ken of modern science or even the sharpest doctor. Thoughts, feelings, even perceptions. That's in the mind. And that's the manomaya. And then go even subtler, look even deeper. There's the intellect, which is doing all this thinking, all this understanding, all this Vedanta. That's also just the intellect. It's a thought. It's understanding. That which comprehends or does not comprehend. It's another function of the mind, a subtler function of the mind. That which gives you a sense of I am this, the ego. All of that, Vijnanamaya Kosha. And then beyond that, if you try to force backwards, if you try to investigate, you will just end up with a blankness. Like the blankness of deep sleep or the blankness of meditation. Absolutely calm down the mind, blank. All of this, Vedanta says, notice, they're all experiences. The body is experienced. The physiological body, pranic body is experienced. Mind is, manomaya kosha is experienced. The vijnanamaya kosha. So all of these are experiences. And you are the witness, same witness consciousness. This is the method of pancha kosha. Or there's the method of the 3 states. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep. The whole of the Mandukya we studied. It boils down to this thing that you are not the waker, dreamer or deep sleeper. You are that core consciousness which dressed up as the waker. I turn up with this body and this world as Sarvapriyananda. I the waker am Sarvapriyananda. Here there are 72, counting myself 72 wakers in different bodies, different minds. But when we fall asleep, each of us has a different world, and in that world we also exist. We are the dreamer. And then we completely deep sleep, blank. Each of us experiences that blankness every day. The same consciousness appears as the waker in experiencing the waker's world, dreamer, the dream worlds, and the deep sleeper, blankness. But the consciousness is one and through, running through all of this. Again, the same witness consciousness. So all of these are different methodologies which Vedanta says you can first understand the methodology and then come to a clear understanding of yourself as consciousness, but most important, experientially. Many people postpone this. They say, okay, I've heard the teaching, I have understood it. Now the experience depends on many years of spiritual practice, so I will now engage with it. For 40 years later, I'll come back and tell you whether I have experienced it or not. No. You are making a big mistake. Advaita Vedanta says, just now, what spiritual practice do you have to do to experience the body? Nothing. Just look at it, it's here. Exactly like that, even more so. There is no further practice to be done to know that you are this witness consciousness. You are right here. So if one doesn't get it, if it's not clear what is being meant here, then all the spiritual practices will be helpful. But when you finally get it, you will know it was there all along, all the time. So this witness consciousness, the real self, now I'm making a distinction between self and not self. The real self or the self, Atma, not self, Anatma. What is the not self? Which I had taken to be the self till now. body, mind, intellect, ego. Specifically the ego, the sense of I. This is what I thought about myself till now. I, and the ego is surrounded by mind and body. So I, this person with this body, with these memories, with these abilities, with these knowledge, with these achievements, with these memories, all of this is who I am. Now we realize the whole thing is the apparent self, not self. Sanskrit, anatma. You are the witness of this not self. What about, so now notice, what are the characteristics of these two? You, the witness, must be first and foremost, you must be consciousness, because you are aware, you experience. And the anatma, the not self, is not conscious. It shines with your reflected consciousness. That's why the mind feels lit up by consciousness. But a consciousness does not belong to the anatma. It belongs to you, the real self. Notice, you are one, ekam. And the anatma, the not self, is a composite of many things. The body obviously has millions and billions of cells. And the mind has so many thoughts, so many facets, so many modules to it. Like memory and intellect and personality. So many things are there in the mind. These are all complex, like a complex of things, but you are one. Consciousness, self is one, the not self is many. Another thing, notice that obviously the world outside is changing and the not self, body is changing and the mind is also changing, Sophia Loren notwithstanding. The mind is also changing. All of this is subject to change, and you, the self, which is consciousness in itself, is not subject to change. You say, why do you say that? Are you stipulating that it's not subject to change? I'm not stipulating it. Notice, how can it be subject to change? Consciousness, which is uniform awareness, change means it must have parts. Change in something always is a change in its parts. Consciousness, we just agreed, it has no parts. It is one, uniform. What will change? How will it change? What will change into what? Not only that, a deeper reason why consciousness, there can be no possibility of change in consciousness. How would you know? If there's a change in consciousness, it would be an object. If you know about a change in consciousness, it would be an object of you, the awareness. Then it would not be you, the awareness. Remember, object and subject are different. Did that make sense? Think about it. It's impossible that you can know of any change in consciousness. Okay, we can't know of a change in consciousness. Why can't there be an unknown change in consciousness? Not even worth answering the question. You can say anything. If it is in principle completely unknowable, then anything could happen. It's no point talking about such a thing at all. So there is no change possible in consciousness. Hold on to that. No change possible in consciousness. No change possible in the real self. All change is in the world and the apparent self, the not self. Atma, no change. Anatma, change. And so on. All trouble, very important, all trouble is in the not self. What we considered to be trouble earlier, sickness, body, not self. It's not my sickness. Unhappiness, mind, not self. It's not my depression. So lack of fulfillment, not self. Another thing, the self is, consciousness self is perfect. It is unlimited. We will not go into it. It will take a whole class. But we have studied it many times. It is not limited by space or time or object. It is non-dual. It's not subject to change, not subject to old age, disease, frustration, depression, death. Consciousness is free of all trouble. And all trouble is in the not self. And so on. So all of this is taken for granted in this verse. We have studied all these things now. This distinction between self and not self. And just you know these things, but just as an important marker, this is also not Advaita. Non-dualism, see, this is a kind of dualism itself. Self and not self. It's a Sankhyan Prakriti Purusha. So Advaita will be that the not self is absorbed back into the self. The whole world and body mind appears to consciousness. In consciousness is nothing but consciousness. This is not mentioned here. It will come in 24th verse, Brahma Arpanam Brahmahavi. But anyway, I'm just mentioning it. This self, not self distinction is just by the way. It's on the way. But it's very, very important distinction. It's the key to understanding Advaita Vedanta. Alright, all this is background. Now what is the meaning of this verse? Meaning of this verse is all these distinctions between self and not self, which we did. Self is consciousness, not self is not consciousness. Self is one, not self is composite. Notice one distinction, very important. There is no action in the self, and there is all action in the not self. Pure consciousness does not act, does not change, is not capable of action. There is no question of doing something in pure consciousness or even stopping action. What can stop action? That which has possibility of action can stop action. Karma and akarma, doing work and not doing work, that's possible for something that does work. But in pure consciousness, which is beyond this, there is nothing for it to change into, nothing for it to do, nowhere for it to do. So, it is the pure consciousness which we notice is actually beyond action. But the body-mind is ever engaged in action. You will notice the dialogue with Rupert Spira. One point I brought up was, he uses this phrase, what is this entire universe and the body-mind? It is the activity of consciousness, he says. Now he understands it perfectly, what he means by that. The only thing is, I just pointed out to him that consciousness in itself does not have activity. And he of course immediately agreed. He said, yes, it's like a movie in which a movie is playing on a screen, but it is true. In his words, if you go and touch the screen, there's nothing going on there. The screen, nothing, when a car chase, a Hollywood car chase, cops and robbers, in the movie, but not in the screen. So, no action is possible in consciousness. All action is at the level of body, mind and the world. Now, this is what is meant by this verse. When we say action, it is the ego, aham, which is a part of the mind, an activity of the mind, which is surrounded by the mind and the body, and which finds itself to be the doer of actions, karta. Karta means doer or agent of action. How? Walking with the legs, I walk. Ego comes in there, I walk. Speaking with the tongue, I speak. The ego says that. Thoughts, understanding, I understand, I remember. Or just the opposite, I do not walk, I'm sitting and meditating. I do not think, I have calmed down the mind. All of it is the activity of the ego. It is the ego in the mind which is surrounded by activity and claims truthfully, I do, I walk, I talk, I eat, I think, I understand, I enjoy, I suffer. Enjoy and suffer, that is called bhokta. So two things, karta and bhokta. Karta, doer of actions. Bhokta, the enjoyer or sufferer of the consequences of actions. So the entire law of karma is circumscribed in this limit of the ego. The ego does actions, truly, and gets the results of those actions. Actions have consequences. Good action, good results, merit, good karma, pleasant results. Bad action, negative results, that is papa, and the result will be dukkha, unpleasantness, unhappy life. So, this whole thing, the whole secret of action is here. Meritorious action, non-meritorious action, the results of good action, the results of bad action, dharma and adharma. The whole thing is a play of the ego with the body and mind in the battlefield of life in the world. Pure consciousness, the real self, is that which illumines this whole movie. That is the screen of consciousness in which this whole movie plays out. And the whole Mahabharata plays out. If you are identified, pure consciousness, forgetting itself, identified with the ego of one of those characters, surrounded by the mind and body of Arjuna, says, should I fight or should I not fight? And the truth is, you, the pure consciousness, you are not Arjuna. Rather, you are the completely unaffected witness of this entire drama where the whole Mahabharata fight is going on. Or you can say, you are all of it. You, pure consciousness, are Arjuna and Krishna and the good people and the villains and the entire drama, everything is within you. Swami Virajanandaji, one of the presidents of the order, he says beautifully is that the entire universe, including the body and mind, is presented to me, the consciousness, at once. Either I am all of it or none of it. Notice, the whole panorama is presented to you the moment you are aware of this waking world, including this body and the mind and the person that you think you are. Our ignorance is to say that I am this one, I am limited by this skin. From this skin inwards I am, from this skin outwards that. I and that. Then starts samsara for you. What happens? Pure consciousness, not knowing itself, has now identified itself with the ego. The moment I am identified, I, the witness consciousness, forgetting myself, identified with the ego, I am still there, perfect. The screen is still there, movie is playing. But now I am identified with the ego. Now immediately the ego is fully connected with the body. So I become connected with this mind, the person called Sarvapriyananda and the body of Sarvapriyananda, and now this whole world becomes a physically real thing. Why? Because this physical body is now considered this to be me. Then the physical universe also becomes real. This is I and this is not I. And then samsara starts for me. Why does samsara start for me? Avidya kama karma, Shankaracharya says, ignorance, desire and activity. Not knowing my perfect nature as pure consciousness. Remember, what did we see? All trouble in the world. No trouble in pure consciousness. All imperfections in the world. No imperfection in pure consciousness. Not knowing my perfect, unlimited, Purnam, on the infinite nature. Now I find myself with a very imperfect body and mind. Very limited body and mind. Entirely dependent on this physical universe and others. And I want so many things for fulfillment. And I engage in action. All stemming from desire. And desire stemming from a sense of inadequacy and a lack of fulfillment. Lack of fulfillment in inadequacy. Why? Because I think I am this thing. I have forgotten my completely fulfilled, completely adequate, pure consciousness nature. Now, forgetting that, engaging in action, I try to get the infinite through the finite. Swami Vivekananda says, this is the nature of samsara. You are trying to get satisfaction, completion, fulfillment. You are looking for it where it is not to be found. It is to be found in your real nature, which is ever fulfilled, infinite. But I am using the word infinite where a very precise meaning is there, not limited by time, space and object. Not knowing that, I engage in action. The world cannot satisfy. If I am hungry, world can give me food for this body. If I am ignorant, world can give me some knowledge for this mind. But if I want to live forever, the world cannot provide me with eternal life. If I want to be absolutely omniscient, knowing everything in the world, you cannot do that. There is a limit. I was reading about Borges, the famous writer. So he had I think it was Umberto Eco probably, one of the two. He had a huge and growing library. And then he sat down and calculated. If he read one book per day for the next 50 years of his life, that's also impossible. But he said, what a small fraction of the available good books which he would like to read, only a small fraction he could read. So that did not stop him from collecting books. He used to call it the anti-library. So what is a library? Library is the library of books you have, which you are reading, you are likely to read. And the anti-library is the books you have not read, and probably are unlikely to read in the rest of your life. They are still there in the shelves. And this is a good thing to have an anti-library because that reminds you, makes you humble, reminds you of all the knowledge which exists in front of your eyes, which if you could get it, but you will not. But Vedanta says that's impossible. And suppose you did get all that knowledge, it would fade within a few years. It would just go. With the death of the body, it will go. And wealth, whatever we accumulate, wealth will go. Achievements in this world, people will forget. Knowledge will be forgotten or superseded. Better knowledge will come. none of it can give that infinity which we are looking for. That infinity is there only in our real self. So what Vedanta is telling you is, realize that you are that witness consciousness, and then look upon this world and express that infinity in your, live the life through this one person. Not trying to get infinity, but expressing and manifesting that infinity. You are perfectly at peace and joy as the Atman, beyond action, transcending all activity, not affected, not tired out by activity, not frustrated by failure, not grasping at anything by activity, but expressing the joy and fulfillment of being this infinite. So, what is the meaning of this language? What is Krishna doing here? What Krishna is doing is, suppose we are seeing the proverbial snake in the rope. And Krishna is telling us, look at the snake as a rope. We are puzzled. It's a snake. As Krishna is saying, the wise one sees the rope in the snake. We say that to see a snake as a snake is wise, and to see the rope as a rope is wise. But how can you see a snake as a rope? Because we are making a mistake, and Krishna is trying to correct the mistake. There is only one way of correcting the mistake. Because we are seeing the snake only, the Krishna has to start there. And what he means is, it's not a snake, it's a rope. That's what he wants to say. So he says, the wise sees the snake as a rope. And in this case, what is so-called activity? I am doing so many things, good things or bad things. The wise person sees that I am not doing. All the activities of Arjuna, whether you will fight this battle or you will not fight this battle, all those activities are not really your activities. You are the screen, the unlimited consciousness in which has appeared the Arjuna personality, the Arjuna body, and this Arjuna's waking world. And you're playing out this movie, nothing at all is happening on the screen. As Rupert said, if you go and touch the screen in the middle of a intensely active, action-packed movie, you'll find nothing is happening there. Krishna is saying, recognize, in the middle of all activities, there is no activity going on. You as consciousness. Own up to that. Notice that. And no need to switch off the movie. The fun is in the movie, but as long as you recognize it as a movie, let the activity go on. You cannot stop the activity of body-mind. Earlier verse Krishna has said, not even an instant goes where you can stop activity. Body and mind are constantly in motion. It is the very nature of Prakriti, of nature, to be in dynamic motion. So throughout the day, the body is acting, activity is going on. You can't stop it. What you consider to be stopping activity is the rest of the body and mind. When I go to sleep, no activity. Or I'm sitting in deep meditation, that is no activity. That is in the view of common people, it's entirely wrong. That is the ego which is holding forth the body and mind and saying I'm meditating, no activity. That's also an activity. When you say, I fast, what are you doing? I am fasting. Fasting means not eating, so it's not an activity. And yet you say, I am fasting. It's an action that we are doing. And because it's truly an action. The ego in connection with the body and mind is restraining the hunger urges and holding it back. That's an activity. It takes a lot of activity. It's more difficult than eating. Eating is an activity and not eating is a more intense activity. It takes much more willpower and conscious effort not to eat. So, fasting is an activity, though literally it means not eating, not doing something. Even sleep, when we naturally go into a state of inaction, physically the body is doing everything. And there is a seed of conscious action. The moment we spring up from bed next day in the morning. So I was reading this philosophy book, which says, how do you get out of bed? He says the great philosopher, the existentialist Camus, he said the only important philosophical question is whether we should commit suicide or not. That's the first thing to decide, whether life is worth living. So this philosopher says, I'm not all that great, but let me ask this smaller question. Should I get out of bed or not? And he's giving examples. Nietzsche, he used to get up at dawn every day, wash his face and sit and write his, do his philosophical writing straight till 11 o'clock. and 11 a.m. And he says he was a child compared to Kant, who would get up even before dawn, when it was dark in Königsberg, and he would wash his face and take weak tea and then start working till late in the noon. So they got out of bed. Then he says, go back to the great Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of Rome, great at its peak. And he says he was not a morning person. He lay in bed till noon. But of course, thinking. He was a great philosopher. So do you get out of bed? When you get out of bed, you have all these activities in seed form. I have to rule the empire, Rome, or I have to write philosophical books, Nietzsche or Kant. So activities there in a seed form, in deep sleep also. When you get up, it comes out. So all the activities of the body, in all the phases of body-mind, it is full of activity. You cannot stop it. You cannot get beyond it. And pure consciousness, you in the real you, no activity. This is not possible. There is no question of stopping it or starting it. So the wise thing is to recognize this and rest in your serene, pure awareness and let the body and mind engage in action. You will notice ethical action becomes much easier. It's only when I am the little ego threatened by the world, I act out of fear or out of desire. There is temptation or terror. When I am completely fulfilled and completely untouchable by death or disease or frustration or failure, what will tempt me? What will scare me? You become completely fearless in action, become completely ethical. Ethical action becomes easier. That's what Krishna is recommending. You will have very deep peace in the midst of action. Then he says, buddhimān manuṣhyeṣhu. Such a person is wise among all human beings. What is this wisdom? So see, normally wisdom is understood as seeing things as they are. Krishna is saying, actually you are not seeing things as they are. So this wisdom is to see just the opposite. To see in the midst of all activities, you see there is no activity going on. The screen is not acting in the midst of a action movie. No action. And in the activity, in the non-activity of the unenlightened person, when with the ego you restrain the body and mind, that the wise one sees as activity. The ordinary non-activity, people think sitting quietly, going away to the Himalayas, as Arjuna was proposing, I will not engage in action. I will go back, I'll go off to the Himalayas and sit and meditate there. That's still part of the movie. That's also a different kind of activity. Krishna says, the so-called non-activity of the ignorant, the wise one sees activity there too. So in the midst of all activities, the wise one sees no activity, because I am pure consciousness. There's no activity there. No action, no karma. Transcends karma. And in the foolish thinking of the ignorant, who identified with the body and mind, sometimes they think I'm acting, sometimes they think I'm not acting. That not acting is also action. That's also, you're still caught in karma. You're still trapped within the wheel of karma. Buddhimān, this is wisdom. So this is wisdom. This is the wisdom which sets you free from the wheel of karma. Not by running away from activity as, oh Arjuna, you are proposing. Not by plunging into activity as, for example, your brothers are proposing to plunge into dharmic, ethical action to do their duty. Not even that. Or into unethical activity, like those villains across the field are trying to do. Not by that. By realizing what you truly are and then engaging. Let the body and mind engage. Swami Vivekananda put it well. He said, intense action combined with eternal peace. Intense action combined with eternal peace. How is that possible? Eternal peace as the Atman. Intense activity at the level of body and mind. You can sit in the calmness of the eternal calmness of the snows of the Himalayas. Your mind could be working like a blast furnace. It's not just quietness of the mind. Mind can be active. Body can be active. You know that you do nothing. So that's the peace in the midst of action, and that is wisdom. So yogi, so yuktaḥ. Yuktaḥ means that person is a true yogi. Not the common sense idea of a person who sits quietly in meditation, eyes closed, apparently not doing anything. That person is still acting as long as that person is identified with body and mind. I, the great yogi, will sit quietly and meditate. No. I've shared a story of a yogi I found in Gangotri, very nice young boy from Nepal. He had these dreadlocks and sitting in front of a cave in a very spectacular location with the Ganga flowing fast below 200 feet below him. And from the other side of the bank, he said, all these tourists come and they take pictures of me and I feel good. So he's innocent. But that's also activity. Clearly, there is desire and there is activity. So this person is a yogi, not who you think is a yogi. This person, be such a yogi, Arjuna. Fight this battle, do your duty in the world and be completely serene, centered in Advaitic knowledge of the actionless Atman. So kṛitsna-karma-kṛit, very important thing, a very interesting phrase. After making a complete mess of our general ideas of action and actionlessness, he says such a person is the doer of all actions. What do you mean? Why do we do any actions at all in the world with the body and mind? For fulfillment. And such fulfillment is ultimate fulfillment the world cannot give, action cannot give. Action is not meant for that. Action is not meant to give you fulfillment. Fulfillment comes from the knowledge of yourself as Brahman, the realization. Being settled in that when you're clearly fulfilled deep inside, having got that beyond which nothing more is there to get. Being established in which the deepest of sorrows cannot shake you. Having got that, the knowledge that I am Brahman, you are the doer of all actions. Doer of all actions means you have got what actions are supposed to give you. People engage in action for fulfillment. You have got it. Therefore, you are the true doer of all actions. You have accomplished action. Not that this person has done everything that is to be done in the world. There's a give list, 100 things to do before you die. Don't you ever start on that. It's a waste of time. So, you have completed all those lists because what people in the world are seeking for through money making, through chasing pleasure, through chasing power, through doing good, through chasing knowledge, in all these ways, some of them good, some of them not so good, you have got that ultimate everlasting fulfillment. Okay. So that's the meaning of the verse. Now let's quickly look at, as promised, I'll look at the chat first and then we will take questions. What percentage of people get it from the outside? Very small it seems. So some practice purification is appropriate for the vast majority. Rick, of course. The whole of the Gita is meant for that. But remember, this is the core teaching. Not from the outset. Arjuna will have many questions. Questions about meditation, questions about prayer, questions about belief, questions about the fickleness of the mind, questions about desire. All of these will be answered, including exercise and food and all of that. So it's everything has its place. But it's good to get the core idea very clear. That seems, once you get it clear, it's also, a certain peace of mind comes by knowing that at the deepest level, at this point also, it's all right. I can go about my business setting things right, clearing the path for spiritual realization, but knowing that I have it, what I'm seeking for, it's already there. It's more a question, and it's imperishably mine because it is me. It is I myself. It's a question of making it a living reality. Yes. Practice purification appropriate for vast majority? Absolutely. We must be honest. Start where we are. Swami Vivekananda used to say, I know where the shoe pinches. It's not in philosophy. It's more in our day-to-day life, the little problems, the little struggles of life. Then Nirchari is asking, is individual jiva being referred to as the anatma? You have to be careful here. Individual jiva, the jiva is always individual, it's an individual sentient being. Remember, from an Advaitic perspective, in ignorance it thinks of itself as this body, mind and ego. Body, mind, ego, identified with body and mind, this is the jiva in ignorance. The same jiva, when this knowledge dawns, knows that I am Brahman. The whole teaching is meant for the jiva. So when you say the Vedanta teaches I am Brahman, who is that I? It's the jiva who is supposed to realize that. I am Brahman. When you say Tat Tvamasi, that thou art, who is the thou being referred to there? Thou is the jiva. The one who in ignorance thought of itself as the jiva, who in knowledge realizes I am Brahman. So is the individual jiva being referred to as anatma? In ignorance, what it thinks of itself is the anatma. In knowledge, what it knows is the atma. Krishnamurti, bhakti also seems to be in the realm of non-atman ego. Yes. Notice this is entirely the core of the path of knowledge, what is going on now, from this 18th verse to 24th verse. The core of the Advaitic path. Bhakti, not only bhakti, the karma yoga, the meditation, the raja yoga, all of these are practices which are ancillary and helpful. But yes, true, not what is being talked about here. Is bhakti about the non-atman? No. It is ultimately about the atman. It is ultimately about about Brahman. You know what is bhakti? Swami Turiyananda ji says in one place, very touchingly, he says, Vivekananda, I am Brahman. Vivekananda could say that. It does not come so easily to me. He says, it does not come so easily to us. So we say, thou, not I. That is bhakti. Thou to whom? That same Brahman, which is my real nature. It might be helpful for a long period of time to revere that, worship that, and be centered in that as thou, my Lord. That is bhakti. So ultimately, it's not about the ego. In fact, all the spiritual practices are about transcending the ego, whether it is meditation. See, unselfish action. Unselfish, that is unegoic action. Action done not for the ego and its body mind, but for the others. Meditation, where in deep meditation, one of the first things you forget, in deep concentration, one of the first things you forget is the sense of I. That's gone. You transcend the ego. Bhakti, where you lower the I and God becomes bigger. The I becomes smaller and disappears, and the Lord becomes bigger. Not I, but thou. So everywhere it's not about the ego, it's about transcending the ego. How long did Ganesh pause at this verse? Not as long as we are pausing. I'm sure he was a smart kid. He got it far faster than we did, I think. Doesn't this verse belong to chapter 2? No. Chapter 2 gives so Prabhupada Baba was asking this, chapter 2 gives this basic idea which I just imported from chapter 2. But now third chapter, Krishna has talked about karma yoga. Now the question will be, tie it together, bring it together. My Advaitic realization, which was given in chapter 2, and my life in the world, I, Arjuna, as a warrior, we in our lives, whether you're householder or monk, husband or wife, you are son and daughter, you are a teacher, you are a corporate executive, politician. In this life, how do I live that Advaitic realization? That's the question. So it belongs in chapter 4, definitely. It's that Advaitic spiritualization of the whole of life. Good. So there are people who have raised their hands. Prakhyat? You have to unmute yourself, yeah.
Yes. Good evening, Swamiji. I'm not sure how to ask this question, so I'll try to use a metaphor for it.
Who's asking?
Dmitry.
Oh, Dmitry. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. So it's hard for me to formulate it in specific language. Therefore, I'll try to use a metaphor. Like when you used the parable of the screen and the movie, or like the steward and the master.
Yeah.
Like the screen cannot change the movie, right? Like you cannot just walk outside.
No.
All you can do is actually witness it. Because like what I'm trying to hint at, is it the remnants of the ego that sort of says, well, how come if I'm a Brahman, I have no power?
Remember,
not sure if
I understand the problem. If you take that screen and movie analogy a little further, you might come up with this question. So the whole movie is playing out in me, the screen, but I don't seem to have any control over what's happening there. Notice, first of all, when I say I want control, I would rather have it this way rather than that way, and it's a good thing to have. It's already the ego, which has preferences, which would want that. Now, power. Do we have that power? Who does not have the power? I don't think I have much power as Sarvapriyananda. So that same consciousness identified with the body mind of Sarvapriyananda, the ego of Sarvapriyananda, does not have much power because the body and mind are very limited. But the same consciousness shining through the ego of God, I, the Lord of the universe. God is Saguna Brahman, which is the other form of the Absolute. Absolute in relation to the universe. Has all the power. It's the director of the movie. That's the God we worship in religion. And what we are talking about, the screen is behind both. The screen is underlying, is the Absolute which appears as God and as the individual Dimitri or Sarvapriyananda.
I see. And then the next question would be, if I'm that reality behind God and Dimitri, how come I experience only Dimitri?
Yes. So in both cases, it's Dimitri's mind who's asking that.
Yes,
you experience Dimitri because that's exactly what you're intended to do. You means this body mind, which experiences itself. Remember, this question comes from an inadequate separation between consciousness and mind. Right? It's like going into a dream and then you're being told, look, you are not only that person, you're me and everybody else, you are the dreamer who's dreaming this entire world. You are the trees, you are the sky, you are the earth, you are all the people and animals and the plants, and you Dimitri too, you are that. And then you might ask this question, if I am everything, how come I don't experience it through your eyes and I don't know what the other person is thinking? How can I be everything? And yet it would be a fact, it would still be a fact that you, Dimitri's mind, is dreaming of this dream in which you are there. Even in a virtual simulation, when you're in total control of it, when you enter it, you take the perspective of an avatar and not others. Yeah, if you're in total charge of the whole thing, you can switch avatars and you can go from one perspective to another, which God can do and yogis can do. Certain in Patanjali yoga, they can see it from different perspectives. Kashmiri Shaivism says you can, after enlightenment, a Shiva yogi can actually get the perspective of Shiva to see through all perspectives. But Advaita Vedanta is very grounded in the here and now. What can we expect right now? You can expect to be the Absolute, not God. You as Dimitri, you can know your own absolute nature, which is also the absolute nature of God. There you and God are one. As Meister Eckhart said, the ground of God and the ground of my soul are one and the same. Which is exactly what Advaita Vedanta says, that one consciousness appears as world, every individual, and the God of this world. Now that's enough for enlightenment. That's enough for freedom from suffering. The rest of the questions, what about different perspectives? What about the powers of God? If I am everything, don't I have any power? You have the absolute power of giving reality to the entire universe, awareness to the entire universe, value to the entire universe. But to fiddle around with bits and pieces of the universe, that power is reserved for God within the movie. Yeah. So the analogy does not stretch totally. I mean, no analogy does, of course. So in Advaita Vedanta, they're very clear. The jiva, even when enlightened, does not become God. The distinction between God and jiva remains within the framework of appearance. Upon enlightenment, it sees in an absolute sense they are one reality. The differences are because of the mind of the jiva, which we still would like to have from less power to more power, from less knowledge to more knowledge. So that's what the jiva wants, and that's why these questions arise. Mm-hmm. Think about it.
Expectation.
Yes. What were you saying?
I didn't want to interrupt.
No, I'm done. Yes, expectations.
So then the expectation is the same, because those are intellectual questions that arise. Like practically, it's very clear. For this ground reality of what it is or what is the work to be done.
Yes.
But like those intellectual questions, they arise.
Yes.
And hence I'm asking them. So is it advisable to continue think about it as they arise?
Think about it. You
say well, it's not really practical. Therefore, focus on the the task at hand better.
Yes, but the questions are also interesting, and they are also helpful for our spiritual, our understanding, a deep understanding of what is being said here. So, what the question is, why don't I become God when I'm enlightened? And Advaita Vedanta says, if you put it that way, you see the obvious impossibility. When you realize you are water, the little wave does not become a tsunami wave. Little wave becomes the entire ocean in that sense. I am water everywhere. But when it comes back to itself and it can think of the waves and all, it still finds itself as a little wave. And it looks up and it knows I am one with everything. I am one with the entire universe, including one with God also. But I still am not. I didn't suddenly increase and become God. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Is there anybody else?
Yes.
Rick.
So you said that in the phrase, he who in action sees inaction, the word inaction refers to pure consciousness or being or Brahman, the silent.
Right.
Okay. Now, in the next phrase, if we define the word inaction the same way, he who in inaction sees action, then consider, if a person has achieved Brahman consciousness, or, then all of this is that. That alone is. We see primarily our vision is of consciousness. And yet, there's all this activity taking place of the dynamic universe. And so perhaps from that person's perspective, one is seeing the dynamism of creation within the inaction of consciousness. So maybe that's a possible interpretation of the verse.
It could be a possible interpretation, but there are a couple of issues with that. One is, from an Advaitic perspective, there is ultimately no action at all. That if you look at it from the absolute perspective, there's no action going on at all. From a screen's perspective, there is the movie, which is what the screen appears as, but there's no real action there. So, to see action in Brahman, it would be very dicey for a non-dualist to say that. So, what the non-dualist does is, what Shankara's interpretation is that he says, from an enlightened person's perspective, where you think there is action, he sees no action. And where you think there is no action, I'm sitting quietly and meditating, he clearly sees there is action.
How about Lesha Vidya, though? There's even in the highest state of consciousness, there has to be some kind of recognition of relative activity in order to function. And perhaps that relative activity is, Lesha Vidya meaning faint remains of ignorance. That relative that, I'm just saying for everybody else, but perhaps that relative activity is seen, contained within the silence of Brahman, the silence of pure consciousness, and it's just a reinforcement of the point I was suggesting.
Correct. And it would just be a logical point that the Advaitin is making to not take that interpretation. In fact, in one sense, the Advaitin is saying exactly that. What Krishna is trying to say here is, let all this action continue. What you think of as this tremendous battle in front of you, this unpleasant duty that you have to perform, ethical action in this world, or he will say later, after enlightenment, before enlightenment, karma yoga, activity done in a spirit of selfless altruism, is good for enlightenment. After enlightenment, same activity continues, but this is the manifestation of your oneness with the universe. It would be expressed as service to everybody else, as love to everybody else. So at that level, definitely, not just a little bit of action, all action is acceptable. In fact, it is from the yogic perspective, the Patanjali yoga perspective, which goes against action. The more you're involved in action, more you're involved with Prakriti. You have to withdraw. And whereas from a Vedantic, Advaitic perspective, the most intense kind of action, what we would consider as action, is acceptable from an Advaitic perspective. You just have to know the reality.
And all that intense action is taking place within Brahman, or the appearance of it is anyway.
Appearance
so
of it.
There you have action within inaction.
Yes, you can interpret it that way. But the only thing is, Krishna will later on, I think the 9th chapter, he will go on to say that, look, this entire world is within me, one. Then he will say, but notice, the world is not within me. And this is yoga Ishwaryam, this is the glory of my yoga. So what he means to say, look at it in 3 stages. Entire world, universe full of activity is presented to you, the consciousness. This is where 2nd chapter ends. You are pure consciousness and the world appears to you. It's full of activity. Presented to you, the consciousness. And later on Krishna will say, in me, the pure consciousness, it's not that this world is a world of activity presented to me which is separate from me like we did earlier, subject, object, separate. No. Notice that the entire world of activity, this entire universe is appearing in me, the consciousness, as you are saying. So that till that point it's perfectly alright. All activity is appearing in me and there's nothing beyond me. I comprehend everything, I pervade everything as pure consciousness and make it all possible. Then next he goes on to say, but look, there is no activity in me. There is nothing in me. It's consciousness and consciousness alone. It's a screen and screen alone. If you look at the lake in which you see the reflection, you see there are trees and the birds flying around and clouds sailing across the sky. But if you touch it, it's water and water alone.
It's one of those both and paradoxes, where you can sort of see it both ways.
You can see it both ways, and you should see it both ways. That's the delight of it. And that enables you to act with intense activity, engage in, you want to be socially active and, for doing good to humanity, or just living your life as an enlightened being. All of that is perfectly alright. Ashtavakra says, whether engaged in activity or withdrawing from activity, the unenlightened one is forever restless and anxious. The enlightened one, though fully engaged in activity, is forever at peace. The difference is that flipping is able to see this as perfectly alright. Alright, that's a good point. Is the sense of individuality a total fiction? Gloria, right? Think about this. Look at the language you used. Total fiction. What is a total fiction? Total fiction is still a fiction, right? There's still something happening. So Harry Potter might be a total fiction, but it would still make sense to say Harry Potter went to Hogwarts. Somebody might write a good review about it, somebody might write a bad review about it, children might discuss the story, and it will all make sense, though it is totally a fiction. Similarly, when you say individuality is totally a fiction, suppose it is, it still makes sense for the individuality to talk about it, let the individual perform activities, and all of this can go on. When you say totally fiction, it does not mean what I think you are pointing towards. Is it totally non-existent? No. That Advaita never says. It can be totally fiction, and yet everything that you see going on can go on most happily. Then, is it calmness in the midst of work? When you say inaction? Yes, but calmness is not a mental calmness. I'm trying to keep my cool. Don't push me too hard because otherwise I might lose my cool. No, not that kind of calmness. This is the calmness that comes out of realizing I am forever, I transcend work and its results do not pertain to me. Rodrigo says, is it that we are so attached to our unenlightened experience that even though we understand that we cannot let them go? It is true. As Rick said earlier, a whole course of purification of mind is necessary, otherwise it's not so easy to let go at all. If deep sleep is not considered inaction because of this ego remains seed formed by this logic, samadhi would be considered inaction, would not be considered inaction. Yes, even samadhi which is achieved through effort, it's also a product of effort. And if you come back from it, there is still the seed of action there. The only thing that is beyond action, beyond the law of karma, beyond causality, is Brahman, your real nature. Samadhi is a state of the mind. That's still within causality. Okay, let me stop here, and there will be an announcement. The co-host has an announcement. Prakyat?
Yes, Maharaj. 1 second. everyone. We have a couple of announcements. First, we have an upcoming guest lecture series for this Vedanta study group on Zoom. The first lecture is tomorrow, November 7th, 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time by revered Swami Sarvapriyananda, who is the resident minister of the Vedanta Society of St. Louis. He will be sharing reminiscences of Vedanta monks in the West. You should have already received an email about this lecture series with the Zoom link. Please let us know if you have any questions. We hope you all can join us tomorrow. Second, if you would like to make a donation to support the Vedanta Society of New York and these classes, we will gladly accept it through PayPal or checks. Please visit www.vedantany.org/donate for the donation link and mailing address. I've also pasted the link in the chat, or you can always go to our website, vedantany.org, to find more information. Again, please let us know if you have any questions about this in the future. Thank you.
I hope you have got the link for tomorrow's lecture. If you haven't, let us know. Do come if you can and join us. We are very lucky that Swami Chaitananji Maharaj has agreed to give this talk, and I requested him to speak about some of the giants of yesteryear's spiritual masters, Swami Pavitranji here, Swami Prabhavanandaji in Hollywood, and Swami Satprakashananji, whom he found in St. Louis. All realized souls, and Swami Chaitananji has wonderful reminiscences. I just wanted him to share those beautiful memories with us. So do join us at 5:30 tomorrow Eastern Time. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.